What's up, everybody? Welcome to IGN's X-Men Days of Future Past spoilercast. Got Daemon, Nick here. We're Google hanging out with Joshua and Jim from our LA office, and we are joined by Scott from the East Coast. We're on a first name basis because we all have impossible to pronounce last names. We've all finally seen X-Men Days of Future Past. Time to talk about it. Let me start things off with the question, does Quicksilver steal the show?
100%.
Right?
In my opinion. Evan Peters was the last thing I remember seeing him in was Kick-Ass. He's done a lot of stuff. But that scene with the Jim Croce song playing behind it is just, I could watch that, and I would pay again to just see that.
That was my favorite scene. It actually reminded me of the Nightcrawler scene that opened up X2, which I think is still my favorite X-Men movie.
That's the one where he's going to the White House. Yeah, that was amazing. That was pretty amazing.
And you know, guys, it's like, it sort of serves as a reminder for the fans, too, because when Quicksilver was first debuted, like when we first saw the image of him in costume, everyone was all in an uproar because it didn't look like the comic book character, and the reaction was knee-jerk, and it was, oh, they're ruining Quicksilver, and it turns out he's awesome in the movie, so it's just a 100%. Nice reminder to wait till we see the final product sometimes.
But it is, you see him at the beginning of it, Scott, and he's it is a little off-putting. You're like, who is this kid? His hair looks kind of strange. He's a little eclectic, and then all of it plays beautifully into that scene. And, you know, if you guys haven't seen the movie yet, you'll know exactly what we're talking about when you see it. Wonderful, wonderful. I guess we're supposed to spoil things for people, which is the whole point of this.
It's okay.
But you have that.
I really enjoyed Evan Peters' performance in the movie, too. I mean, it was a great supporting performance, very showy. He does steal the show. I have to agree with you guys on that. And I thought that, I know Evan Peters more from his work on American Horror Story. Yeah. So to get to see him play something much lighter, more tongue-in-cheek, I liked his little choices, like he talks really fast and everything, like everything is sped up with the kid. So yeah, I thought overall Quicksilver was great, and now it's going to be curious to see how does Marvel and Aaron Taylor Johnson, how do they pull off Quicksilver now after what they've done here with X-Men.
That bar is set very high for old Godzilla.
Well, I know it's rough because nobody seemed to appreciate Aaron Taylor Johnson in Godzilla, so now he's going to be coming on, following up this Quicksilver role. So I don't know.
Seemingly he'll have more of a role in the up-and-coming Age of Ultron films, right?
Yeah,
Age of Ultron, not the film.
I mean, he was the lead of Godzilla.
Yeah, but I mean, the Quicksilver character will have more of a footprint. And it begs the question that, getting back to X-Men Days of Future Past, why did they not just keep him with them? This guy is like a guided missile of awesomeness.
It must be because he could just make everything so easy, right?
I guess, but I mean, Joshua.
Good question.
Joshua, what do you think of that?
Fassbender enough screen time too, I guess, right? Plus, he was a kid. Maybe it was too dangerous to bring him. I mean, basically, it's just he serves he's there to give the movie a good, cool scene, and then save some for the next movie, which I'm sure he'll be in. So.
Which I appreciate, but
the rumor is that he is supposed to have a much bigger role in X-Men Apocalypse. So we've seen him now in his 70s kind of look. So imagine Quicksilver in the 80s, which is when X-Men Apocalypse apparently happens.
And Jim, they're bringing back the same actor for that, right?
That's my understanding.
And Joshua, you're IGN Comics guy. What did you think about the movie as a whole?
I thought it was great. It's kind of funny that the comic book was just this 2-issue mini arc that was just sort of done. It didn't really tie into anything else. If that story was made today, it would be this giant 10-part thing that would take over the whole summer, and would have all these tie-in issues and variant covers. But it was really just this one thing. And it was very much different than we saw in the movie. But I liked what they changed about it. In the comic book, Kitty Pryde was the one who went back in time, not Wolverine. But with Wolverine, it was actually really funny to watch him wake up and, that awful, it was a great position for him. But, when those guys showed up, and to watch him, just get back to his old body. And he looked jacked, by the way.
He's bigger than he's ever been ever.
Young Wolverine looked really great, and but so I really enjoyed that, and I thought they perfectly balanced, how much they bounced back and forth between the future and the past, and the future when things were just going just awful. And it really just it built up to the tension of what was happening in the past. I thought it was really good.
Is it weird that Wolverine never acknowledged his bone claws?
I think that was a little strange.
A lot of people don't know, right?
That was a little, that was the thing that was kind of strange. There were a few, I mean, obviously you're going to make a movie this complex, you're going to have some plot inconsistencies and logic.
Right.
One of the big things for me was the claws. You know, we saw in the Wolverine, he gets the adamantium torn out of his claws. He's got the bone claws.
Right.
How did he get the adamantium back onto his claws in the future?
Well, he's been hanging out with Magneto, so you can just imagine that he was like, well, these sure are ineffective against Sentinels, as we saw in the movie where he tried to hit the Sentinel and just pretty much bounced off. So with hanging out with Magneto, the rest of his skeleton is still covered in it, so he could just recoat them for him.
Sure. I guess so.
Well, I don't know. At the end of the Wolverine, he had metal claws, didn't he? Because he has to break them off. He gets them cut off at one point, right, by the Silver Samurai?
Yeah, but then they just grow back. They regenerate as bone claws.
Yeah.
So by the end of the Wolverine, he has the adamantium skeleton, but not but the claws are bone. So there's a lot of stuff in this movie where you got to kind of take that leap of faith and say, I guess Professor X is still alive.
Right? That's what I was going to say. Did I miss the explanation?
Well, here's the thing. With the end of the Wolverine that was setting up Days of Future Past, where they both, Magneto and Xavier, are there at the airport, and that same metal detector gag is played again in this movie. It makes no sense. They go to contemporary times to get Wolverine, and yet in the future, it's like 20 years later, and they're all back together. It doesn't make any sense, actually, is what I'm saying.
Well, you got to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit, because when at the end of the Wolverine, when they meet in the airport, you do see a commercial on the TV for Trask Industries, which is kind of hinting at Peter Dinklage's robotic revolution or whatever. So they're kind of setting it up there.
Peter Dinklage is good as usual.
Scott, is there anything that the Dink can't do?
No.
Peter Dinklage
No
is
way, man.
amazing. I think he can play my life story better than me. 100%.
I think he's a great actor, but I don't think that character was particularly compelling. I thought Trask was actually, in terms of the X-Men villains, wasn't that interesting. I think it's getting Dinklage to play it. I would have loved to have seen him play an even more kind of dimensional character.
I thought it was missing a villain for the climax back in the 70s at the White House. I needed a big fight there.
You had
Sentinels.
Yeah, but that's in the future. And the 70 Sentinels were kind of goofy to me.
That was the thing I kind of liked about the film, right? Is that to me, X-Men and all these big ensemble casts, it's not about having the main character who suddenly has the MacGuffin that can suddenly overcome the villain like we've seen in a lot of other comic books. I know that was the worst description of anything ever. But it's not about Wolverine having powers that can overcome something, right? It really is about this ensemble cast and the dynamic, and I thought that was really cool. You sympathize with Fassbender almost all the way up to the point where he tears the stadium out of the ground.
That was pretty good.
And surrounds the White House with it, which was the coolest thing that I've probably ever seen on celluloid or digital celluloid.
It's not an X-Men movie unless Magneto lifts something huge
and floats around like this.
Like the Golden Gate Bridge, whatever. Yeah. That's nothing. That's a pittance, as they say. But no, I liked it. And I like that they set these characters up that you sympathize with, because to me that's the power of the X-Men, is that they're all the protagonists in their own stories, right? They're not bad people. They're just fighting, unfortunately, opposite each other for whatever reason. And the dynamic, I thought, was really well set up. What I thought was even cooler was that they got almost every single person back from the original films just to play their roles and not have to write them more of... Like Halle Berry's character, or Storm rather, Halle Berry coming into play and only being in a few scenes, I thought was awesome.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't the main character, but we still got to see Halle Berry as Storm. She was a secondary character, but she still did her job as an X-Men. I thought that was really cool.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, they got...
There are a lot of practical reasons for all that, too, is that she was pregnant at the time, and they only could get her for so many days. And I think it was just one of those cases where their limitations in terms of scheduling and being able to get everybody actually worked in their favor, because you had to do a less is more kind of approach.
Which was great, and that's the way I think the X-Men should be, is, you've got all these amazing characters, but that's... Like, taking a small amount of them and throwing them into an awesome story is, I think, the way they should do it going forward.
Now, did I miss the explanation of why Charles is alive in the future?
Well, at the end of X3, there's that post-credit scene where Charles Xavier wakes up in the a hospital patient who was brain dead, and sort of takes over his body, and so that's just our explanation for that. So we're assuming that body, he got up and then somehow became crippled again and wound up in a wheelchair again, and then he got a makeover and he looks just like he used to.
Well, and speaking of not being crippled again, was it necessary for the younger Charles to be walking again?
I thought it was cool. I thought it built well into the character's conflict, right? Yeah. Of like, they set him up so that he has to take this drug so that he can walk, but it neutralizes his powers. And that's his conflict, right? Is he going to go forward? Is he going to lead this
I don't want your future.
I don't want your future, baby. It's not my bag. But I thought that was cool. It was a nice little moment, and it gave them that awesome moment when they're sitting in Cerebro, and Wolverine has to do something that's completely uncharacteristic of Wolverine, where he has to show compassion and be like, you need to lead us. Yeah. I can't do it. He says, I don't have it in me. I can't help you, but someone can. And they have that awesome scene where he looks through Wolverine's eyes into the future, into old Charles's eyes, which would trip me out. I don't know how you guys would feel about that, but that would just blow my brain apart.
Actually, that hits on something that I actually didn't love about the movie, that Wolverine... I mean, it's cool to see character growth, but he wasn't very Wolverine-ish.
I agree. He didn't do anything, right? He's not the protagonist.
He was giving like inspiring speeches and like all this stuff. Where he was missing that sort of Wolverine snark and that edge to him that we always like.
But he is the older Wolverine at that point. That's the personality of the older Wolverine. He just happens to be in the younger, more berserker rage Wolverine's body. So he has that sort of like all the lessons that he's learned from decades of hanging out with Xavier kind of now coming useful for him.
And it's a great sort of completion of the original series of films to bring Wolverine full circle like that, whereas he's now the guy who is having to kind of solve everyone's problems and sort of heal the team, I guess. Because I suspect we're not really going to see the old cast again. I think it's going to mainly, moving forward, be the First Class team and Hugh Jackman. So in that regard, it's kind of a nice send-off for the original guys, And
like, this is like in Happy Days, too, where Fonzie went from being the cool badass guy to then becoming a teacher.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much.
I hope it's not quite that extreme
with Wolverine.
I still want to see. I mean, that is cool, right? The one time Wolverine tries to do something awesome in the movie, he gets his bone claw stuck in a Gatling gun, right? Doesn't really work out for him. But that was awesome, and like I said before, I really appreciated the fact that he was sort of the protagonist and that he was pushing along the action, but he wasn't really the main character. It was really about that dynamic of the old 70s group and, Xavier and Magneto and Mystique, which I thought Jennifer Lawrence did a fantastic job again.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's never bad at anything either, right?
Super jealous of her.
I thought the Sentinels were awesome, and like that opening scene with the Sentinels was really badass.
So, Scott, you don't think that they're going to go forward and try to do more with the traditional X-Men cast? The James Marsden, the Famke Janssen. I mean, they all came back at the end, right?
Yeah, I guess it's never say never. I mean, because the movie's a huge hit now too. So a few years ago, Lauren Shuler O'Connor, who's been the producer on these since the beginning, had actually said she wanted to do like X-Men 5 and 6, which would have been the continuation of Patrick Stewart and all those guys, and then also do another series, which is sort of what First Class has become. So now it is possible. But I do know that the Simon Kinberg, who writer-producer on the film, has said that this was kind of intended to be the end of the line for those guys. So we'll see. I don't know. The movie's a huge hit, and in a large part because of those guys came back for it. So it could still happen. So I think for sure Hugh Jackman will keep coming back, though.
Yeah, I think they'll get at least one or two more out of Jackman. He said, talking about retiring and all that, but I think that's why they're looking at, we've had video conversations about this before, but, they need another kind of face for the franchise. Jennifer Lawrence, I think she just has one more obligation to play Mystique, and then she'll be done. So that's why it's like, will it be Jennifer Lawrence, maybe Mystique being the kind of new face of the team, or now with Channing Tatum as Gambit, maybe it'll be him.
I'd like to not talk about Channing Tatum as Gambit and instead go back to that they brought the original cast back. And I want to talk about that final scene where Wolverine's walking through the mansion and he sees everyone getting a happy ending. These couples are back together. Kitty Pryde and Colossus together, which is a nice nod to the comics. But the big one for me was seeing that Jean Grey was alive again. That brought nerd tears to my eyes. I was so happy.
But does that make sense?
Does that erase X-Men 2?
So the Phoenix just didn't find her at all?
I think it does. Or maybe all those movies still happened in one way or another, but they turned out all right. That's another option.
Yeah, but that to me betrays what the character's going.
X-Men 1, X-Men 2, and X-Men 3 have all been erased, guys. And the Wolverine and X-Men Origins Wolverine. All that stuff was erased.
That sucks.
You don't know that. Phoenix Saga still could have happened, but turned out all right.
Yeah, but not in the way that we saw it happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So X-Men 3 was erased.
Well, yeah, yes, that movie, as we know, it was erased. But I'm just saying the events still could have happened in different ways because they've still been living for all this time. You know what I mean? And she's still a conduit for the Phoenix Force. Like that never went away. But just let me finish. The point I was trying to make was just that we were so wronged by X-Men, X-Men Last Stand, and we just X-Men fans have just been bearing that pain for what is it, like 8 years now, or 5, 7, whatever,
eternity
for years now,
yeah.
For a long time, and for us to get like her back and Scott, at the end of the movie, it felt like so much like justice was served, sort of put a Band-Aid on all that pain that we felt. And honestly, I feel like in as far as like movie franchises go, like this never happens. This is the best thing to happen in terms of like movie franchise Band-Aids since Firefly got a Serenity movie.
I mean, they did it with Star Trek, sort of, right, where they decided to rewrite some of the history of what had come before, and I think they did it very well. I think that the only downside to rewriting the history of X-Men is that we now potentially have to watch James Marsden wear those Oakley sunglasses over and over and over again. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. What's happening?
You have to wonder how Brett Ratner feels about the fact that his entire movie was erased.
Well, he knows nobody likes that movie, right?
Well, here's the thing, though, about Ratner and Last Stand. He was just a shooter. That script, which is, ironically enough, by the same guy who wrote Days of Future Past, was already set. Matthew Vaughn was supposed to direct X-Men The Last Stand. So there's no guarantee that people would have liked X-Men The Last Stand even if somebody else had made it, if a lot of their issues are with the story and how it was executed. Ratner just basically came on at the 11th hour and shot that script. So I just think it's kind of funny now. Everyone's raving about Days of Future Past when it's a lot of the same creative personnel.
Sure.
Yeah, but X-Men 3 was the reason Ratner had to come in, as you well know, Jim, is because Matthew Vaughn dropped out, who eventually made X-Men First Class, which we all love. So there's something to be said for the original creative vision, seeing the project through as well.
Now, what's
we'll
happening?
Remember that when Ant-Man comes out.
Well,
yeah.
What's happening at the end of Days of Future Past? X-Men's being dredged up from the bottom of the lake or whatever, and it's seemingly Stryker digging him up, but it's actually Mystique. What does she have planned for him?
Well, see, I thought that was going to be this is how he gets his claws back, right? We see Stryker and we're like, oh, he's going to start this all over again. They're going to bond the adamantium to a skeleton. He's going to get his claws, which is going to be rad. But then you see the flash of yellow in her eyes, and you're like, okay, I don't know what to think.
What's she doing with him then?
Yeah.
So does Stryker not get him? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
No, I think that basically maybe she has her own kind of secret plan that we're going to need Wolverine, and we're going to need him to be even more badass. Maybe she does, because she knows what Stryker was up to and what some of their experiments were. Right. Maybe she thinks it's like taking a page from Magneto's playbook. You got to do something bad for the greater good.
Sure.
I think she's setting him up to be her ultimate sex slave.
Wow.
I mean, with a body like that, I'm not going to lie. Damon and I know from experience, it's difficult to have a body like that and keep it
tough to maintain.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
I have to eat nothing but protein all the time.
5 chicken breasts an hour.
It's got to be hard on Hugh Jackman, right? I mean, how long can he keep this up for? There's only so many times you can call The Rock to come train you before you can't do it anymore.
Yeah. No, his movies have to be numbered.
He seems to say he's only got a couple of movies left, so we'll see. I don't know. It depends on the money too, doesn't it?
Well, sure. Now, for people out there who haven't read a lot of X-Men comics, explain to us what the Easter egg scene at the end of the credits is all about.
Or Scott, do you want to take that one? Comics History 101, man.
Sure. So the dude that we saw in ancient Egypt building pyramids is a guy named Apocalypse, who is a big villain who first showed up in the 1980s, which is appropriate enough since the next movie, X-Men Apocalypse, is supposed to take place in the 1980s. And he's basically the first mutant ever. He was born in ancient times and has lived for thousands of years and is just super powerful. And his whole thing, what is it, Joshua? His whole thing is not just survival of the fittest, but survival of the ultimate fittest. Like he doesn't care even if everyone dies, that's enough for him as long as only the best of the best are left, right? It's not just mutants. Like, you can be a human in his world, right?
Yeah, if there are some humans who have like impressed him enough, for his guidelines, and he's deemed them like worthy of evolution and stuff like that. That's his whole shtick. And one of my favorite parts is that he has his 4 horsemen, who we saw again a glimpse of four guys literally just on horses as he was building the pyramids just by lifting his hand up, which was pretty cool. But my favorite X-Men is Archangel. I love when he gets the metal wings and like the blue skin and everything, and so I'm really hoping they find a way to work him into the next movie.
Do you think we're going to see?
But other X-Men have been. I'm sorry, Nick. Other X-Men have been have filled that role also, haven't they?
Yeah, Wolverine, Gambit, and he's allegedly supposed to be there. Channing Tatum, so that could happen as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think we'll see Wolverine as one of the Horsemen at some point?
Yeah,
that could get his claws back. I just want to get his claws back.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
Sure.
Wolverine without his claws is just useless. It's like cake without a fork. You know what I mean? You can't.
Who is the mutant that can make people sick?
Oh, the guy that's like.
Yeah, he makes people nauseous and they throw up in that Vietnam
I don't know,
scene.
but that's a horrible mutant.
I thought that was awesome.
Brett Ratner.
That's Ink from the Young X-Men team.
I thought that guy was awesome. He had like one.
He was interesting.
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we wrap all this up, gentlemen?
It was awesome.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
I think we all are in agreement with them.
It was awesome. Quicksilver was the Nightcrawler of X-Men: Days of Future Past.
Oh yeah, perfectly, easily.
Yeah.
Sure. Viewers, what did you think of X-Men: Days of Future Past? Let us know in the comments, and for all your movie news, stay tuned to IGN.